Hey, good morning, and once again, my apology for being 20 minutes tardy. We appreciate your coverage. This is important, and the data that you have, I know there's a lot, and you'll want to consume it and then follow up with questions. But that's the reason why we're a few minutes late, and we appreciate you covering this. We're here to give you an update on the efforts of the Providence Police Department and what we're seeing in crime month over month and year to date, and then we look at 5-year averages so we can compare as best we can apples to apples. Every single day in my 8 years with this mayor, 7.5 years with this mayor, I report to him on all crime that occurs in the city, and he questions and follows up. There's no one more focused on the safety of our city. This mayor, Jorge Alorza, who's going to open it up, talk a little bit about what we're seeing and what our efforts are going forward. So, Mayor Alorza.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's great to be here with the Chief and other members of law enforcement. I appreciate members of the media being here and covering this important information. So, as you can see in front of us, there are 5 weapons that were recently recovered. I believe this all happened over this weekend. Many of you were here several weeks ago where we did something very similar. There were 9 weapons recovered in a short span of time. Thankfully, no one lost their life this weekend, although we did have a couple of, one unfortunate incident, I believe, where someone was shot. But what we want to do here today is give the community and let everyone know, give a snapshot of where we are in terms of crime throughout the city, not just year to date, but how it compares to previous times, to previous years. What we also want to do is also recognize really outstanding police work. Recovering guns is not easy, and as you can imagine, it's extremely dangerous. There's a story behind each one of these, and so we want to recognize the good work that's being done by the police department and by the officers. They're keeping all of us safe by taking guns off the streets, and the Chief will have more to say on these incidents in just a moment. This is also an opportunity to talk about all the partners that we have. Many of them have joined us several times in the past. They are integral to the crime fighting strategies here in the city. And the last piece of today's message is also we have to stay focused. We have to stay on guard because everything can change in an instant at any moment, and so there's always more work to do. So I want to begin by walking folks through the various charts that you've received. I'm going to start with the one labeled shooting victims and incidents by year. Everyone should have it in front of them. So I'm going to ask everyone to direct their attention to the first half of 2020. Before that, for 4 consecutive half years, the numbers were relatively low, and they're not only low, but effectively the difference between the red line and the blue line. Right? The blue line are shooting incidents, and the red line is shooting victims. They differ, or the red line moves further away from the blue line whenever there are multiple people shot in one incident. As you can see, for that 2-year period, and for most of the time before then, those lines are always close together, meaning that there are relatively few incidents where multiple people are shot. This began to change in a lot of ways during the second half of 2020. Remember, the first half of 2020 was the pandemic, and then it was really bad in the second half of 2020, and that continued for the next couple of half years. First half of 2021, and then the second half of 2021. The numbers spiked up to levels that we hadn't seen in about 10 years here in the city. Not only did the numbers go up, but you can see the separation between the blue line and the red line. That means that during the shooting incidents, there were more times where multiple people were shot. This is something that's also new, or relatively new and recent, that we're starting to see here throughout the city. We've spoken about that publicly in the past, and the reason why not only the numbers have shot up, but why there are more people shot whenever there's an incident, is because of what you're seeing right here in front of us. I would say that it's no coincidence that each one of these is a fully semi-automatic weapon. We're seeing less and less of the revolver guns that are recovered. The revolver guns are far slower on the trigger than these semi-automatics. And not only are they slower, but they don't carry as many bullets in their clips. So we've seen several instances where we're seeing a dozen shell casings. We're seeing 20 shell casings. In fact, just last year we saw an incident where there were 60 shell casings let off in, I want to say, a matter of seconds. So there's simply, whenever there's an incident, there are more bullets flying, there are more guns, so multiple guns being used, and that's causing more people to get shot whenever there's an incident. So I think that helps to explain what you're seeing in front of you in these graphs. The last thing that I'll emphasize in this graph is that for the first half of 2022, the numbers have come back down, thankfully, to that stretch that we had for that 2-year period from the second half of 2018 to the first half of 2020. We're hoping those numbers either stay there or continue to decline, because every single time those numbers decline, those are real people, real families that don't have to suffer the consequences of this. Next, I'll turn to, you should also have three other sheets. Turn to the one for aggravated assault offenses by year. As you can see, with aggravated assault offenses, this is a bit of a mixed bag. They were very steady for the first 3 years that are depicted here. Then they declined, went up, and so it's up and down, up and down, up and down. This year, for the first half of 2022, if you compare it to the first half of 2021, the numbers are actually up. There have been 27 more aggravated assaults this year than there were at this time last year. So that's certainly something that the police department is working every day to help address, and we hope to bring those numbers down, and it's part of our crime fighting strategy. The aggravated assaults, a breakdown of these shows that many of these are fights. These are fights, and most of the times the people who fight, they know each other, or it's one of these disturbances at a club where they get into it and someone gets arrested for aggravated assault. But that's the story there. It's a bit of a mixed bag. There are two other instances that we want to highlight. The other one, so I'll turn your attention to the robbery offenses by year. So just so that you know, so the part 1, violent crimes that gets reported to the FBI. So the normal reporting that every city throughout the country does, they include aggravated assaults and robberies. So we wanted to focus on almost all of the categories of violent crime. So on robbery, here you see a more hopeful picture, and in particular, I think it's very hopeful. We're living in a moment where people's perception of crime is their fear is very much heightened. Everywhere you look, there's crime on social media. There's there's instances that are reported everywhere. But I think that understanding where in fact we stand is really important for everyone to know. If you look at the numbers dating back to 2011, there's been a pretty steady decline. For every 6-month period and for every year for the past 10 years, so that today robbery numbers are 35% of what they were 11 years ago. So those numbers have declined 65%. And robberies are important to highlight because while many crimes are targeted, so for example, the vast majority of shootings are targeted in the city. Robberies, it could be anyone, and I think that's what scares so much of the population, thinking that that could have been me, and I know how that spreads fear throughout the community. However, and unequivocally, it is far safer from a robbery perspective and from the perspective of being a victim of a random crime. It's far safer today in the city than it was in the past. So there's that paints a hopeful picture, and as always, the police department is working very strategically and also hoping to continue to drive this number down. I'll turn your attention to the next graph, the burglary graph. So, this is the one property crime that we highlight here. And the reason we highlight this here is because, again, it speaks to this fear and concern of being the random victim of a crime. If someone breaks into your house, there's nothing more chilling, there's nothing more frightening than something like that. And so here we also have a very hopeful picture. Looking back at 2011, there's been a constant decline up until now, and that's also the result of really great work by the police department, by several changes that we've made, better illumination throughout the neighborhoods being one of them, and by neighbors looking out for neighbors. It takes a whole of government and a whole community to have this kind of impact. Over this 11-year span, the numbers have declined about 78%. That is just remarkable, and it's kudos to all of the people, law enforcement and otherwise, that have been at this work for such a long time. So that also paints a hopeful picture. We don't sit in isolation. We're part of a broader context. And the reality is that right now, even after the pandemic, many cities are continuing to see an increase in a spike, not only in shootings and homicides, but also in violent crime as a whole. Thankfully, what we're seeing so far this year in the city is bucking that national trend, and in fact, our numbers are on the decline. I want everyone to know that we are not spiking the football, because that can change at any moment, and that we need continued vigilance to make sure that the numbers continue to trend downward. So to finish up, yes, this is heavy on statistics, but I want to emphasize once again that every time the numbers goes down, that means that someone has not been shot, an individual, someone's life isn't torn apart by violence, and someone doesn't have to live with the fear of having been the victim. And so there are real people behind this, and we never lose sight of that. The second thing, and the chief will speak more on this cannot be done without good police work. The chief is going to share some stats on some of the arrests and the guns that have been seized, along with the rising prevalence of ghost guns in our community, and that's a very, very scary, concerning development. Next, thank you to all of our partners. Police department and the city, we cannot do this alone. We really rely on everyone to do this job. So we're really thankful for all the people, from organizations to just common residents and citizens who do this work. Last but not least, we have to remember, let's stay on guard. While there are reasons for cautious optimism, sometimes there are factors beyond our control, and this can all change in a hurry. We're very aware of that, so we're not letting down our guard. I'll hand it back off to the commissioner, to the chief, the commissioner. The last piece that I'll mention is on homicides. So at this point last year, or at least for the first 6 months of last year, there had been 10 homicides. This year, the number of homicides is down to 4. So, that's, again, we're happy that the number is down, but we still have 4 homicides too many. The challenge with homicides is that since the numbers are so low, the differences between years, I wouldn't read too much into those homicide numbers. So yes, we're thankful that the numbers are down, but I think that the more important statistic to look at is the number of shooting incidents and the number of shooting victims. You know, sometimes it's just random whether someone who is shot loses their life or not. But there's also reason for cautious optimism and reason to be hopeful there. I know this is a lot of information. The commissioner will come back up to introduce the chief, and we'll take some more questions and dig deeper into these numbers. So I'll pause for now.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things just to underscore, as I did 2 weeks ago when we met. This isn't easy. You know, you see 5 guns here, you saw 9 the previous. It's good police work. Targeting those folks that have a propensity to use guns in our city. So kudos to the Providence Police and particularly the Uniform Division and the task force folks that are strategically placed in areas of our city, knowing that we've had an uptick in shootings and violence. So, you know, I can't underscore enough how important this focus is and the results. You know, the data is the data. We're pleased with the data. Too many people are getting shot, too many guns in the street. We're not gonna solve it by, you know, taking all the guns off the street. It's just impossible. But taking them out of the hands of people that have the propensity to shoot other people is what we're laser focused on, and the results are showing. And we're gonna continue, because again, that can change real quickly, but it's not for the lack of effort and the strategy of this police department, along with our partners. As the mayor says, ATF is a part of a group as well, and Pawtucket Police and Central Falls and the Rhode Island Department of Attorney General, doing some work on violence and targeting those folks that we know have a propensity to shoot other people for varying reasons. So without further, let me just ask the Colonel, Hugh Clemens, our Chief of the Providence Police, who leads this, and he and I talk more than the mayor and I every single day about what our strategy is, and he's the pro, and he has put some of these strategies together based on not only the experience, but what's happening nationally and what's been effective. So Colonel Hugh Clemens.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you all for covering. It's all true what the mayor said, what the commissioner said. I mean, this is tough work we do in the community. It's we're data-driven. We're surgical in our approach. We try to be an intelligence-led police department. We try to look at data in a very granular way. And I commend the major in charge of the investigative division. Every single day, we talk several times a day. Major Perez is here as well. He's done this a long time. It's really challenging work that we have in this community, and we're not spiking the football, but every single one of these incidents affects communities, affects neighborhoods, affects public housing developments, and we work very closely with our community partners. So we are data-driven. We look at stats all the time. We set strategy every single day, every single week, and we direct our resources, monetary and workforce resources, to our greatest need at the moment. And that could change on the fly. That could change at 11 a.m. this morning. That's the field that we are in, the professional field that we are in. So I cannot commend the men and women of the Providence Police Department enough for the hard work in taking this dangerous weaponry off the street every single day. Over the weekend, 5, we saw a couple weeks ago, we had a press conference here, in one 8-hour shift, there were 9 guns taken off the street. A week and a half ago, in one car stop, 4 guns taken out of one vehicle. Dangerous individuals. One of them was wanted for homicide in New York City in the borough of Brooklyn. They had ski masks. They had 4 high-powered weapons. I believe 1 or 2 of them had high-capacity magazines, extended clips. They were here to do something. So without question, the Providence Police saved a life or lives with that car stop and with that seizure and with those arrests. Over the weekend, same thing. At the tail end of an event on the east side of Providence, India Point Bridge. One of our alert patrol officers, Darren Hull, sees something amiss, sees something suspicious, goes over and confronts the young man, and eventually makes an arrest, a difficult arrest, using force. And what he saw was accurate. He saw a young man possessing a firearm, and there were shots fired earlier. So he certainly averted more violence with the arrest of that individual and the seizure of that firearm. So year to date, last year we had a banner year in seizing firearms and making arrests of individuals illegally possessing firearms. Last year the total number was 210, and this year we're ahead of pace. We're at 134. So one thing we've seen a rise of is the proliferation of firearms, as the mayor indicated, in our community, and firearms that are menacing. Many have high-capacity magazines. We also are seeing an increase in the last 2 years. It continues this year in ghost guns. Ghost guns are personally made firearms. 80%, they come 80% made, and then people are putting them together in the privacy of their homes. They're dangerous in that they are not traceable. They do not have a serial number. I think legislatively that's something we can work on and do a better job of. That is extremely dangerous. So in the last couple of weeks, there have been 26 gun arrests, and 12 of those were had high capacity magazines. 9 of those arrests were made by the Violent Crime Task Force. I commend the members of the Violent Crime Task Force under the direction of the Investigative Division. However, the Patrol Bureau has been doing unbelievable work. Not only in car stops, not only in calls for service. These arrests and seizures come in varying forms and fashions. Some are car stops, some are narcotics raids, some are alert police work, like Darren Hull just sees something amiss. And it's incredible, experienced police work done in a safe way. You look at some of these arrests and you break them down, they're really dangerous situations. And with the grace of God, they've gone well the last several years. I want to thank not only good police work with Patrol, Violent Crime Task Force, narcotics, detectives, but our partners in the community, specifically surrounding gun violence, the Nonviolence Institute, many of the events we have in this city where voices are heard from leaders in this community to tamp down the rhetoric of anger and violence. We did one last weekend with Diana Garlington, Lock Arms for Peace. We do many events with the Nonviolence Institute. These are important voices to be heard in the community, and it's part of our comprehensive, holistic attack on violence, in particular gun violence in this city. As the Commissioner states, we're laser focused on gun violence, and we've done an excellent job, but that could change tonight, and we recognize that. It's constant. Providence has a lot of challenges. We have a nightlife, a huge nightclub activity. We have a lot of challenging issues, but the mayor wanted to do this, and I think it's important to recognize the good work by the women and men of the Providence Police in keeping this community safe. That is our mission, is to reduce crime, fear, and disorder, and there are several incidents where that doesn't happen. But the data is the data, and it's accurate, and you can see it's always important, I say, to look at data in 3, 5, and 10-year spans. And you look at some of the data surrounding some of the other nonviolent type crimes, in particular burglaries. That's incredible work. And that's with strategy, and that's with directing our resources towards that type of activity and targeting those small number of individuals who are creating the biggest headaches for us in that particular area, whether it's burglaries, whether it's gun violence. It's a small number of offenders who truly drive those numbers. So that's where our strategy comes in, where we try to target those particular individuals. And all of that is led on information and intelligence. So, really good work. We work very closely with our ATF partners, and they have some new technology in a NIBINS machine. They've had one for years. We've worked with the crime lab down at URI, but now through a grant, a federal grant, the Rhode Island Attorney General now has that NIBINS machine. Providence Police Department will have 2 investigators trained with access to that machine on a given notice. This is really gonna help us to get more timely and accurate information. We'll be able to take, maybe another story down the line. We'll be able to take shell casings or one of these firearms on a 10-minute notice and drive it down to the crime lab, put it into the machine, and see if there's any matches on that firearm, on the ballistics found on scene. That timely, accurate information is important because when we match it up to other recent events, we're able to quickly, through our intelligence and information, say, we know where this came from. And more importantly, we think we know where the next incident may occur, with what group, in what neighborhood. So all of it is data-driven, strategy-driven, great work by the not only the women and men of the Providence Police Department, but our partners as well in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. We appreciate you covering this, a lot of information, and we'll open it up for any questions that you may have on this data, and I'll defer to folks that may have the ready answer for you. Stephen?
The Colonel referenced a small number of offenders that you try to monitor. Does that hold for each of these categories, aggravated assaults and burglaries and robberies and that sort of thing?
Burglaries, robberies, the gun violence, yes. As far as the aggravated assaults, that's an outlier. Because of the nightclub activity and a spur of the moment chance encounter where you stepped on my foot in the nightclub and I didn't like the way you looked at me and things like that. But for the most part, yes, it is a small number driving those numbers.
Oftentimes you know these people.
We do. Oftentimes, it's incredible to me. It's been this way for years. With technology and footages, surveillance footages, when we put someone's picture out, invariably, one of the district officers will know that individual in the picture. That's so-and-so. I had an encounter with him a week and a half ago.
Overall, what do you attribute to the decline in these metrics?
It's hard to empirically pinpoint exactly. It really is. But I always say it's the comprehensive, holistic approach in everything we do, both as a department with that whole community-oriented policing approach, however, in sync with information from the plainclothes side. So it's the comprehensive approach internally, but as well externally with our external partners. You're seeing crime continue to drive up in many cities around the country, or at least stay static. If you look at the data from 2010 to 2019 in Providence, it was continually going down. And then the pandemic, in the second half of 2020, we shot up like everyone else. But we got a pretty good handle on it in the last couple of months, and I think we're back to where we want to be, and that's trending in the downward direction.
The shooting on Wickenden, 2 questions. One, can we get an update on that? Anything you know so far? How did that happen? And 2, how concerned are you about this? It was around 7:30. It was the weekend, probably a crowded street, and on a place like Wickenden Street, we don't really ever see stuff like that there.
Extremely appalling and disturbing, no doubt. And later on in night, we make an apprehension with.
So just to be precise, it wasn't a shooting; it was a shots fired.
Right.
Okay. So do we know how the window got shattered then? Or?
Yes.
They just shot fired.
So in our terms, that shots fired.
Yeah.
So shooting is when someone is hit by gunfire. So it's shots fired. But again, we make a gun apprehension a few hours later. This is omnipresent. We're dealing with this stuff every single day. No one shot fired or one shooting incident is acceptable. Is it disturbing? Yes, absolutely, but this is the challenge that we have. Not only the police department, but all the groups that we work with in this community in driving down violence and keeping the community safe. So yes, it is disturbing. The update, look, the gentleman who runs that business, he was certainly unnerved by what happened. I know the city sent some resources down to clear the debris from his sidewalk. We've been in communication with him on the detective side, and we're trying to determine if it's related to one of the other incidents that we had going on that night. But again, we've had, if you look at the last month in the city of Providence, we've had events with 100,000 people PVD, maybe 100,000 people Pride. Now we've had a festival, the Cape Verdean Festival over the weekend. By and large, all of those events went very peacefully. A large group of people in wide spread out geographical areas. So it's a constant challenge with there were, Major Romolini just walked in. He strategized endlessly before each of those big events to ensure the safety of the people who attend these events. So is it unnerving? Yes, of course. But it's our constant attention with all of our partners, not only the police department in all this work.
Chief,
So we
you
have a-
have to say that ATVs in the city, that's something that's not a data point here, it's something that residents continually express their concern that they do not feel safe on the streets now. You were all out at a press conference last spring saying, do not come to the city. There was an event just this past weekend where a gentleman said that he was engaged by off-road vehicle bikes that smashed his window in. He said he was told that there was so much crime that to come back the next day and provide a police report. What is the state of ATVs in the city this summer, with folks again continually saying that they don't feel safe Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night? That's all you hear on the city, and people said that they continue to get terrorized.
So another omnipresent challenge that we have are ATVs, and we put together, I spoke about it at last press conference that we had. I don't think you were here, Kate, but we have so many temporary task forces going on, and one of them surrounds ATVs. And in the last couple of weeks, we've activated those resources and those task forces, and we keep continually taking off some of these dangerous, menacing vehicles off the street. But we're not just gonna rid it just like that. So does it continue? Yes. Has it continued in municipalities around the country in larger ways? Yes. And we speak to our colleagues regionally, nationally all the time. It is a huge challenge. And by design, because of their all-terrain status, they can easily escape and evade the apprehension by police. So we have to be strategic in how we take these vehicles off the street and by and large these young men and women who ride them to ensure that everyone is safe, including if we start chasing them and pursuing them. We do not have a no chase policy. We have a pursuit policy that guides us to pursue these vehicles safely. And at such point where a pursuit becomes unsafe, then we break it off and live for another day and get the vehicles off the street that we can on that particular moment that we've activated the task force. In the last couple of weeks, we've gotten about 15 really menacing vehicles where they're endangering the driving public, both in vehicles, on motorcycles, pedestrians. We get it, and we know it's a huge issue in this community, but we'll continue for the rest of the summer in directing this temporary task force towards ATVs as well. So we're laser focused on gun violence, nightclub activity, college nightlife activity, ATVs. We just finished up on a fireworks temporary task force. It's constant. We're constantly strategizing what's before us these couple of days, this week. Where are our numbers increasing? Where do we need to direct our most attention?
And just as a follow-up on the perception of public safety, Billy Taylor Park, 5 shootings in the last several years. I mean, what's your thought? I mean, a public park that has seen continual shootings on Providence's east side. What's police looking to do to address that?
So yes, I mean, we can't have police officers on every corner 24 hours a day, but when we have activity like that, once again, we direct our resources. I know the major, he called me each one of those events, both sometimes before. What people don't realize is oftentimes things that we prevent, and it's hard to empirically say what we prevented, but oftentimes we direct resources in certain areas based on intelligence and information we had, and we did it recently. up there on Camp Street near Billy Taylor Park for an entire weekend, and there were 0 incidents. And then you may go a month and a half and there's no incidents, and then there's an incident. So it's a challenge. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it and say there will never be another incident at this location or with ATVs. It's a constant challenge.
Have there been any arrests for the other shooting that happened on Sunday near Gaspee and Francis Streets where a 28-year-old man was hit?
Very active investigation, and no arrest to report on at this point, but I believe there will be.
And you think that might be connected to the other shooting
No.
on that night? No, you do not.
We don't believe so.
Okay.
Can you share some of those details?
Yeah, so that's if you will, in our terms, an out-of-town shooting. There's a resident visiting that hotel, and he's there to meet an ex-partner with a child custody arrangement involved. And when those individuals show up, there's someone else in the vehicle, and they produce a firearm and fire several shots. So there's a hotel involved. It's adjacent to the highway. The people are from out of state. There's another challenge. You know, we have a huge hotel population in this city, so there's another challenge. But
How's the victim?
very stable. Yeah, it's going to be fine, but and cooperating too.
Just one follow-up on the jewelry store. You mentioned that you were investigating whether it's connected to other activity that happened that night. Can you specify? So if it's not
Meaning
that-
with the gun apprehensions.
Okay.
Maybe we can, through the ballistics through NIBIN, if we can match up any of the ballistics of that crime scene with other events.
But not the hotel.
No.
Steve,
Correct.
Brian, did you guys have something?
Chief,
before we end?
what are you seeing in terms of the white supremacist literature, and what can the police do about that? We've seen that reported in several cities, including Providence. Is there an update on that investigation?
Yeah, so very disturbing. I spoke with Major LePayton on that. We're coordinating with the Rhode Island Fusion Center and our local municipal police chiefs who I've spoken to. They've been circulated throughout the state. People are alarmed, rightfully so. Over the weekend, I spoke to several people who had seen those pamphlets, and we're trying to make a determination as to where they're coming from and address it.
What law could you use?
All right, this is the last one, man, okay? Last one.
What law could you use to actually crack down on that? Is there a specific criminal offense that you could use to stop that activity from happening?
Yeah, so, you know, this is the balance, right? Somebody can put up their hateful speech, and it's protected. There's nothing criminal about that. As gross as it is, and it's not a crime. When we talk about hate crime only kicks in when there's another preceding crime, like an assault or vandalism, that is targeted because of hate in a protected group. Now, you can't post it on, telephone poles or public spaces, technically, but you can say pretty much anything you want in America. And this is another example of somebody with hate in their mind and in their heart putting out messages that are hateful and hurtful to our community. That in itself is not a crime. We'd like to know who it is, and we want it reported, because if we could prove subsequently that a crime was committed and then tie all these things back to that person, then we may have either a federal or a state violation. But that in itself is not a technical crime. Hope that I'm going to violate Lindsay's last one, but go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you. Did I understand you to say that these 5 weapons were all seized over the course of this past weekend
That's correct.
in 5 different instances?
That's correct.
Any of these involved that shooting near the mall?
No,
And not the jewelry store.
we don't know yet. So we're going to take these guns, we're going to send them through our ballistics analysis, and maybe one of these guns was used in mass, or another shooting a week ago or 10 days ago. That's the beauty of technology and this ability nationally to connect guns and shell casings that we find to a nexus or a lead.
These were seized not necessarily in the course of the commission of a crime.
I can't say that because people have been charged. These are illegal guns that people face consequences But these 5 guns, we don't have ADW charges on those folks that carry. Accurate? Thank you everyone for your attendance, and this is important to push out to the public. We're gonna continue to do everything we can to stop violence in our city. Thank you.
Steve, just to expound on that, so